It's like almost a nuclear division, right? So it's just, because I went inside, I think it just had this huge impact. So that so many, and I still get people that ask me for the email, still get people that are responding to it. It's been, a long time, 20 years.
So, so if I hear you correctly, you finally realized you had to come forward and speak your truth, and you confronted your father with a fear that this could be the end of me, kind of fear of destruction, death, being, sort of thrown out into the universe with no way back home.
Yes.
But it had the effect of actually landing so profoundly in him that he started to change, and
Right.
and then it started being passed on to other people. So that sounds like a profound email that just really had some deep juice behind it. I mean, that's quite amazing because it doesn't always go that way.
No, no, it doesn't always go by that. But I also, the biggest thing for me was I felt all this energy. I mean, I
Really?
felt a tremendous amount of energy. I remember the minute I sent it, I was sort of dancing around the living room, and I just, all of a sudden, I felt like I had feet. I could feel everything in my body, and it
Wow.
was electrified by it. Yeah, I
Wow.
really got a sense of, if I keep pushing that envelope and keep saying what I think and keep doing, doing that I would have this sense that, okay, I'm taking care of myself. Now, it doesn't always land as well as it did there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But um, but I remember I was in a therapy session with my spouse and therapist, and I heard them talking, and I said, "You guys, you're sounding really sexist." And I couldn't believe that I said that, but then they looked at me and then they clapped. And so I was really getting that people do want to hear from you. They
Mm.
do, they're not afraid of being disgruntled. They're not afraid of being uncomfortable, but I'm so afraid for them to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it was, how often do we get clapped for in a therapy session? That sounds awesome. Like, thumbs up, keep coming forward. We like to hear that part of you. So,
Yeah.
well, you mentioned something we haven't talked about much here in our conversation, but this idea of, I remember one time when you were talking in that workshop I was at with you, and you were talking about, I've got an invisibility cloak that keeps you away from seeing me, and then one that keeps me blind to myself, my instinctive energy. And I wonder if you could I just really love the way you, express that. So how do you notice that? Like, how have you noticed it? Are there, you know,
I'm so grateful for you saying that, because I don't remember saying that, but it makes sense to me, because I think bridging to the self is really hard for a nine. For me, particularly, I realized that the minute that I started identifying that inner critic, that inner misogynist, I started gaining my femininity, like connection to my femininity,
awesome.
and I started realizing that the things that I really love, like how much I love color and how much I love movement and how much I love utopians, and I started surrounding myself with more of that internal kind of lovely world and putting it outside. And there was something about seeing that reflected
Beautiful.
that I started gaining me. And I remember I was doing a dance class, and I had this uh, feeling of experiencing my hips for the first time in a long time, because it was a hula African dance,
Mm,
belly dance kind of combination class.
mm,
And I thought, wow, this body part is the forgotten body part of women, right? And how vitalizing it was to like get connected to that, and what the emotions that came up from that. And I realized that as a nine, I spent so much time disassociating myself from myself, because I didn't want to hurt anybody or cause any harm, or I had a terror of disappointing people. I hate disappointing people. So if I just don't connect to myself, I can't disappoint anybody. But
mm.
if I actually stand in myself and actually feel myself, other people are going to be unhappy, and they get unhappy. But it's and my new saying now is, it's a good day to die, because it keeps me um in this place of, okay, it's I feel like it's going to kill me, but
Yeah.
you know
Well, I think that what maybe if you're not a nine, the idea, like, if I step into myself, it could be the end. This could be the day I die. Every nine I've spoken to, when they talk about it, said, yeah, this is serious stuff. It's like, it's like this creature, rises up in front of me saying, do not pass, and like the Balrog in the Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf's saying, you shall not pass. And, uh, and, but yeah, I think, sometimes that gets described as a fear of conflict. There's probably a lot of different forms around what is it I don't want to disturb. Um, but so for you, like, disappointing people is like kind of like, oh, that's one for me. And what about just sort of making people mad? I mean, sometimes nines are encouraged to, like, piss somebody off today. You'll be okay. Just try it out. Practice.
Gosh, that reminds me of the Fight Club when they were asked to go pick a fight, and they couldn't get anybody to fight with them. Yeah, I think that, I mean, my experience with anger is that it's transformative for me. It gets me down to me. And so, and I do get really mad. I mean, there are moments when, when I've, gotten really mad. Usually it's at poor Brad, but, cause he's safe. But I don't know. I think, I can't remember your question you asked. Can you ask it again?
Well, what was that question? Sometimes they fly in and they fly out. Oh, something around fear of conflict. What are the kind of things that pop up for you?
Well, I can tell, like, I'm actually professionally a psychotherapist and a mediator, and I've trained a lot of mediators. And I always say that nines are the sneakiest people on the Enneagram, because people call me all the time and say, I have a nine, can you help me? And I'm going, oh, I'm so sorry. We can look the most spiritual without being spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Because this peacemaking thing is not out of love, it's out of fear, and it's out of the ego, right? Because if I look unselfish, if I look like all these great things, I'm going to have this Gandhi-like appearance, or the Dalai Lama kind of appearance, but actually underneath, it's my way of surviving.
Yeah.
If you love me, and I remember thinking about, like, why would my first husband want to divorce me? I mean, seriously, I'm like the most loving person you can imagine. And I'm like a kitten. How can you divorce a kitten, right? And I realized that I had perfected this inoffensive, loving kind of approach. And he hated me. It just didn't make any sense to me. Like, how can you hate me?
Yeah.
And then later I had a job where the big boss was a big four, right? And I remember asking my direct boss, who was protecting me, and I said, "Why does he hate me so much?" And he goes, "I think it's because you're so happy all the time." And it really shocked me. I thought, you can't survive with this affected image of being this totally peaceful person. It's not real, it doesn't work. But it's so seductive, right? Because if someone sees me as, you're so, giving and selfless, it makes me feel like I'm going to be okay. But actually, when I started identifying with the parts of me that weren't that way, that's when life got real. And I started feeling like I was thriving as opposed to just surviving. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then what you point to is so powerful, is a survival mechanism that we, when we're little boys and little girls, we don't go, gee, I'm going to create this survival mechanism so that I turn into a kitten and then I get thrown out because I'm too nice. It's something that happens based on circumstances, etc. That's the veil. I've often said, type nines, I remember telling this story at working with men in recovery, and there'd be 10 men in the group, and we'd meet every day. And after about 2 weeks, there was one guy that I hadn't called on. And I said to him, I said, Devin, how do you do that? I have not called on you for 2 weeks. You like blend right into the couch. And he said, well, I learned that in first grade. Just, I can put a cloak over me and the teacher won't call on me. I said, well, that is really extraordinary. And then I said, the other thing you've developed is this a way to keep me away from you? It's almost like you're a Jedi that says, counselor, I'm good. Look away. Talk to somebody else. It's almost like an instinctive, seductive energy that just has me look away. And I don't know if that resonates for you on any level, but it felt like he had a kind of hypnosis he could do. And I would just not look at him and go, okay, you're here for a recovery from addiction. Your life's been destroyed and you were so peaceful. I don't even need to bother you. And he'll go, yeah, that's how I roll. But anyway, does that resonate for you in some ways?
Yeah, totally. It's like there's used to a friend of mine had a button that said, "Please allow me the illusion that I'm invisible today." Right? There is, but there's the opposite. You know how kind of they say that fives, keep themselves walled off, but deep down they really long for connection.
Yeah.
It's I think the nine sort of equation is, if, like Oliver Twist, if I am this poor orphan that has no complaints and has a loving heart, that some, grand person's going to find me and discover that I am, the heir to the planet, or
Yeah.
this kind of hidden moment where you go, oh, they're going to actually discover me for some movie and I'm going to play this role and I'm going to get an Academy Award but I can't do anything aggressive
Yeah.
to get there.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so Dickensian, right? Because there's such a counterforce inside that says, you don't deserve the extra bowl of oatmeal. You have to wait to get it. And actually, I was in a class years ago, like when I was learning how to be a therapist. And I was in a group and I was sitting there wishing that one of the leaders would comment on me in some way, because they'd just sort of make these interventions. And I was just sitting there waiting. I thought, this is so annoying. So I just said, look, I'm tired of waiting and one of you guys commenting on me. So I'm actually going to say something. And it was interesting because one of the therapists said, well, actually, when you say that, it makes it much easier to see you, right? And it much easier to comment on you. Like there was some kind of energetic shift when I took
Yes.
responsibility for it, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's and I think that's why the Enneagram is so amazing to study, because it gives a visual of the roadblocks, right? It gives a visual of the 9 roadblock is, I'm not supposed to make waves. I'm not supposed to be selfish, right? And I figured that out because I've noticed that when people, they criticize someone, you can tell what type they are, right? So a 9 will sort of, they won't tell you directly, but they'll be judging the people that are assertive and selfish and taking too much airtime and, all those things. That's their kind of, deep down criticism of themselves. And they look at people and they go, hey, that's awful, because they don't let themselves do it, right? So now I've looked at all my 3 and 7 and 8 friends, right? And I go, yay, I'm going to learn from you, right? The other thing is the terror is, if I disappoint you, like the biggest terror of my life is when I would disappoint my dad, because he was such a perfectionist, right? And it was such a big thing to, make a mistake around him, because he would remember it. I mean, he'd remember it. Like he'd remember my mistakes when I was 5, right?
Lordy.
So I had this like terror of disappointing someone. They might think badly of me. And then I thought, who cares? Like, look at all these people that actually get assertive all the time and they get the airtime and they get what they want and they trample some people. They don't,
Yeah.
So it's the big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, I think you use the archetype of sort of like I'm this, I have a kind of role, sort of as like all the types, it's like a frozen role that's going to get me what I want. But it's kind of tricky because I can't speak up and say what I want. And I'm hoping you have enough eyesight to actually see that there's some gem here in front of you. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and then someone just asks for it and gets it, and now I don't really like them very much, but it's like I don't have permission to ask and come forward, and it's such a hypnotic force. I mean, you can feel it in your body, right? It's like I start to step forward, and my body goes, "Oh, this is not going to be good," and so it's amazing to me sometimes that people actually find their way out of it because it is so compelling. I remember one type 9 we would have these conversations, and he would open up and he'd go, "Oh, that is so awesome. I'm going to use that." And then 4 days later, I would check in and I'd say, "How's it going?" He said, "About what?" I said, "Well, remember what we talked about?" He said, "Well, actually, I don't." I go, "Oh, well, isn't that interesting? It's gone." It was like I had the, and then helping him to remember it so he could use it was really, it was like wind through his hands. He would go, "Oh, oh, that's going to change everything," and then boom, it would be gone. So, that disassociation from something that might inspire me, was sort of the thing he was struggling with. So, have you noticed that throughout your life, or different versions of it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think coupled with being a woman,
Hmm.
I say this because it's like, it's a double whammy, because in my family, if I would say something, then my parents would remember, especially if it was something good or intelligent, my parents would remember that my brother had said it, right? It wasn't
Not
me.
you. Yeah.
And I had this feeling like,
Mhm.
I'm not a muse. I'm actually here, like this. And I know that, in the Obama administration, the women actually started saying things when a woman would say something in a meeting, they would say, "Oh, it's great that she said that, because," and remember, that was their idea, because it would be so easily taken away from someone else.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's I think the nine experience. You can have all this great insight and really put it out there, but because there's this counterforce to being visible and
Hmm.
being dynamic, that it can easily get taken away.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So I can see where the blend of the nine-ish pattern, uh, that I'm not important. I mean, we have stories about that. The story, the kind of essence personality story is that when the little nine child, because they live on planet Earth, they have to, you know, develop a personality that starts to create a shell over the essence, and that the essence wound appears to be for the nine, where I feel like I'm not important and I don't have a voice, and so it's just kind of particular to the nine's internal pattern, which is would be certainly become even more challenging if you didn't have a family that saw you and called you forward, and all of that. But it's an interesting thing to sort of wake up in. Like, I've got this pattern. Where did it
Yeah.
come from? I didn't even decide on this, and here I am at type 4, and I'm up and down, and and all that. So um, it's quite miraculous that people even develop eyes to see it, because it usually it hurts in the beginning to see it. It's like it's painful. So what anything you'd want to say about my ramblings there?
Oh, yeah, no, I keep thinking about one of my favorite stories as a kid was Horton Hears a Who, and it was really moving to me. And I think about that now, and I think it's because someone heard this little voice and saved a whole universe, right? And that's the feeling of the nine. It's like you feel like the Whoville people, you know, and
Yeah,
um, and it's this is the piece that I think that nines don't understand. It's really hard, is that you can actually stand up for yourself and say what you think, and people will be disgruntled, disappointed, but that's their responsibility, which is such a shock, because you feel the feeling of responsibility for someone else's, uncomfortableness.
yeah,
So deep, so poignant, and
yeah,
so toxic.
yeah. It's almost like I'm responsible for whether they're experiencing peace or not, and
Right.
and like I'm the peacemaker. I mean, it's not like a conscious thing, but it can be a felt sense. And I can remember one teacher said to me, said, "Michael, you cannot piss people off. They're already pissed off. Let it go."
Yeah.
That, oh, wow, that frees me up for a lot. But it was just like, yeah, that's a fact. That's true. So yeah. So
In
wait,
fact,
go
in
ahead.
fact, I was going to say that when I was working in the jails and the prisons and stuff, I noticed that there were a lot of nines. And I thought, wow,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
did you get here? And usually the story is that they didn't want to disappoint someone, or they were merging with someone. And it's like, I thought, wow, this is really dangerous stuff if you don't wake up, right? And it
Yeah.
always surprises me when you find a 9 in the limelight, because to get to the limelight, usually, especially in this culture, you have to be really aggressive.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of 9s would say, oh, I'd love to be in the limelight, but I'd rather be, get there by birth, like be royal or something, or have
Uh-huh.
to elect me that I wasn't thinking about, or give me some prize to get there, because it would be, you wouldn't want to do anything, you know.
Yeah, to
There's like,
assert yourself.
because you really want to, this drive to be loving, this drive to be is very powerful.
Mm,
And that whole idea of that, what's that definition of enabling, which is not allowing someone to experience the natural consequences of their behavior.
yeah.
That's a real hard one for a 9, because for someone to experience the natural consequences of their behavior means that they're going to have to go through a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And 9s don't want that, so they're in, really, vicious enablers,
Yeah. Would
complementary,
you
complementary narcissists.
do you think it seems like this doesn't always get stated, but my sense is nines are very sensitive to people's states and whether they're suffering or not. It's like even though they might disassociate from their own experience, they still have like a sort of a window of their soul that's open that doesn't want people to suffer and feels bad when they see it, and then they want to go in and help. I think there's probably a very healthy version of that, a more mature version where I don't save people from stuff they need to experience to develop the ambition to change or the drive to change. If I save them all the time, then I'm the one doing all the work and they're just doing what they always do. But so, it seems like at the core of it, there is a wish to, a misdirected wish to bring unity, a sense of unity and peace for people that, until I do inner work, I realize I can't make that happen. I can work on myself, but I can take you to the well to drink water, but I can't make you drink it, right? So I don't know, what do you think about that? Any thoughts or?
Well, that's the gift and the curse of the 9, right? Is that we have so little personality structure. That's the only way I can say it. But there's so few boundaries, and it allows, I can easily step into the shoes of someone. They say, step into someone's moccasins, piece of cake, right? Um, I remember one time I was watching Friends, and another friend of mine had me come over, and I decided I was going to step into the shoes of Jennifer Aniston's character, Rachel. And so I just kind of walked to his house that way, and it felt like I was, in her moccasins, so to speak. And I got to his house, and I sat down, and he's like, this never occurred to me before, but you really look like that Rachel. And I think that what I've had to learn, and this is a lifetime, this is why people say, can you change types? I'm like, no way, because it takes so much work to get through the dynamics of one type. And this particular challenge of, no boundaries between you and someone else
Yeah,
is so big, right? Because it's, how do you make a boundary? It's like, when it's not there, it's really impossible.
yeah.
I've had to learn how to allow, like in meditation, allow the stuff to come through me and then out again.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think this is why 9s are retreating types, because they go into a shutdown because it's too overwhelming. Like, my friends have this new movie rating for me. They call it NFS, not for Susie, because any type of violence or any extreme, discomfort, I can't handle it. I hate it,
Take it
And so
in.
they say, okay, well, this is a great movie, but NFS, right? But for me, I think the more that I can get aware that I need to learn how to work with that sword, because it's a great it's a great skill to have, especially in the work that I do. It's that I can really step into someone else's shoe and describe
Yeah,
the internal world.
yeah,
But it makes me very, very sensitive.
yeah. How do I step in and then not leave myself inside them as I leave the session, or take them in and now they're inhabiting part of my soul? How do I modulate that energy exchange? And I know in the in the Kajif work, we do a lot of work around learning to really sense and feel that sort of 6 foot energy bubble that we live in, and to learn how to um, in a sense, bring our attention internal, so that we develop the capacity to not take in all of the stuff of the world. We stay present, but there's a way that we learn to really anchor that energy system and be with it, and in a sense, kind of create a wall, but it's not like a hard wall, but it's one of awareness where I'm not just taking in every impression or drinking it in too deeply, and just noticing how it affects me. And that sounds kind of ooey gooey, new agey, so it's a little bit challenging to digest. But there's something around. I've noticed one of the things people say is if you learn to really become more internally connected with sensation in your body, that the 4, 5, and 9, that ability to begin to, in a sense, inhabit sensation in your body, starts to create a kind of more natural barrier where I don't just take stuff in. I'm still awake and present, but there seems to be something that gets created around that. So I just wondered, like, do you have particular meditation practices that have supported you in that, or physical stuff, yoga, dance, karate is a great one for boundaries, but anything that, that you've done that...
I was big time into karate when I was younger, and I remember I was walking out of the studio one day and hoping to get mugged because I wanted to practice.
I got my skills on board here.
Then I decided, okay, it's time to leave, so I quit. But, well, I have found that writing really helps me a lot, and I think also I became karmically, to use that term, to use the ooey gooey terms, karmically I became a therapist to learn how to separate myself, right? Because you have to do it as a therapist. You don't have a choice. And so when, early on, I used to take the cases home with me, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And at the point where I couldn't just physically couldn't do it anymore. And then somehow I figured out how to stop it. And so boundaries, like time boundaries, is a big one. Being very clear about, what's okay and what's not okay. After a while, it becomes a survival thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done a lot of meditation in my life, and I've spent a lot of time in Himalayas, done a lot of, that type of work. And recently I've been really aware of, I love also a lot of the new kind of pagan ideals, which is whatever you put out comes back threefold. And I realized that in learning those skills, for some reason, it's helped me to differentiate myself from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And also that in order to help them, I need to get really clear in who I am, because I have a wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It never occurred to me that I had a wisdom, but I have a wisdom. And so that when I offer that, it adds to the intelligence of the whole.
Yes.
And so I also did lots of dialogue groups, David Bohm dialogue groups, and that helped me to realize how important my piece is in collective intelligence.
Awesome.
So that learning, I think that's the thing about a 9, right? Is that it's like this idea, like it's like, we're holographic. So if you do not speak out, then the hologram of the picture of us loses those pixels and gets less clear. So if I'm, saying something, then it helps clarify reality. And so it actually tells me that actually I'm an individual. So anybody that comes in on me and tries to, take away my addition or my piece, then I know that that's not okay. Like you can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. Yeah. Well, sorry. So you mentioned something about the Himalayas that sparked my curiosity. Like, did you do training with monks up in the Himalayas, or just travel through them, or?
Well, travel itself is a training. It is. And the Tibetans themselves I spent a lot of time in Tibet.
Oh, really? How awesome.
Yeah. And it was one of the most moving times of my life, because I was coming out of a divorce, and I was really in a lot of pain. And I was around people that had transformed tremendous pain, like tremendous pain. And I really got a deep sense of what compassion is, like there's they went through a Holocaust. The statistics on the amount of people that died paralleled the Holocaust, right?
Really?
And they have this belief or this tenet in their practice, and I think this is also cultural, which is that life is like an illusion. It's not an illusion, but it's like an illusion, and the way out of that illusion is to have good intentions, which appeals to the nine, right?
Mm.
And so when you do that, then when people transgress against you, you realize that it's really out of ignorance because they don't get that life is in this illusory kind of thing. And so
Mm.
I started to really get that. And also there, I mean, I had one friend who said, because I brought one of my Tibetan friends came to the United States, and she had been like a teacher for me. She had been through the entire liberation of Tibet, and starvation and loss of family, and I mean just the whole thing. And I called a friend of mine who's a very important money manager and very, very busy. And I said, if you meet anybody in your life, you've got to meet this woman. And so he came and he sat down with her and he said, Susie tells me that I needed to come meet you. And if I was going to meet anybody, it would be you. Why would that be? And she started to laugh. And of course she covered her laugh, because that's the cultural thing.
Mm.
And then she said, perhaps because I've been taught never to hate.
Mm.
And that, I think, was why Tibet was so amazing and intriguing in a way. And so I kept going back and trying to help because there was so much sadness there and so
Mm.
much oppression. But I think that what I got back was that these people were using it as a way to become better people. And I sat next to a couple once who had lost a child to a stillborn child, and I was really saddened by this, and I kept asking them about the details, and they told me a lot of the details, and then finally one of them said, this is a teaching for us, and so we work with this to understand it so we can become better people.
Mm.
And I was really that was really moving to me to know that there's this entire culture that takes everything and works with it to become better, to become more compassionate. And so to me, I felt like that was the gift. And the Himalayas, I mean, there's some very magical things that happen there, and you can't explain them. And they're really a light bearer, and the person ahead of us, in the cave,
Mm.
working and digesting
Mm.
types of things. And so so that's why I was there so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that story. It sounds really like you had a profound experience. And I think of the Dalai Lama and, the horror that he's seen, and then how he is so focused on compassion, and and just the importance of, said, without compassion you will never have happiness. Doesn't matter how much money you have, power, you don't have compassion, you have nothing. You're poor. And it's just, he speaks from such a place of deep conviction and experience, and it's just, jaw-dropping sometimes, just his presence around that, and that he's so cheerful. It's not like he says, there's sadness there, but if I stay angry or sad forever, then then I lose. I have nothing. I can't offer what I care about to the world. So, I mean, it's quite an archetype for, and really higher understanding of what transformation is. So, yeah. Well,
One thing I want to say about this really quick
yes,
before
yeah.
I forget,
Take your time. No rush.
the nines.
Yeah.
The compassion, and this is going to sound really cliche, but the compassion has to begin with the self, because the Tibetans they're raised differently. We're not raised to erase the self, and so when they actually have this compassion, it's not just for the guy out there. It's with the self, and that's the practice for the 9. They have to go internal, I think, first,
Yeah.
because it's easy to spiritually bypass that.
Yeah, to
Right.
jump over and yeah. Well, you've had say a little bit about your training with the Enneagram, teaching, things like that. Do you have anything you want to say about that in terms of, what kind of training you went through or experiences you had with the Enneagram, or anything that you recommend, or not? Maybe I don't really want to talk about it. That's fine too. Just curious, because you mentioned that you'd had you have this guide who remind you, said you're a 9. And so did you go on a journey of taking any courses, anything that really touched you, or how did you develop your wisdom around your 9-ishness?
That's a really good question. There was a compilation of people that were involved in the education of Susie and the Enneagram. And friends. I have a friend that's a 9. His name is Jim. We had a lot of conversations, and so that was really helpful to me. And I think it's helpful to be around your own type. And then my friend Carl, who's the one that literally forced the Enneagram on me and all that. And then of course I went to a bunch of trainings, and I think when I first met Helen Palmer, I recognized something in her, and she recognized something in me, and so we had this great exchange, and I felt like her insights really blew my mind, like she could see me. And so that was really, really helpful. And I remember one time I was at a funeral, and David Daniels, because I went to high school with David Daniels kids, right? So, and my parents knew them and played tennis and stuff. So and I had never met him, and we were sitting at a funeral, and he said, "Don't you think your mother is a 7?" And I looked at him and I was like, "I've been trying to tell her that for years." And I've this guy knows stuff, and it was really funny because the irony of the hubris. But I took a lot of their trainings, and I found that especially Peter O'Hanrahan was really helpful to me, very helpful to me. And I mean, I could say a lot of people, but I feel like is that there were unconventional ways that I learned the Enneagram. I mean, I sat in my friend's bookstore for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Carl and I spent a lot of hours discussing it. But I think one of the biggest trainings was I had to put it in a book, which was hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to do it. And being the 9, I didn't want to cause any ruffles or make people think that I was not perfect at the Enneagram. And it turned out to be okay, but it was a great lesson for me to feel like all the fears I had, right? I thought I was going to get raked over the coals and get all these literary critics that don't know
bad reviews,
and survived it.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I feel like I don't know, I'm kind of rambling about this, but I feel really grateful to all the people that said, this is what you're gonna love this. And I do. And I feel like it's one of the teachings that got me to go so internal and gave me a doorway, gave me the key to open up the doorway into me.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. I mean, so grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, it's well, so I have the same experience. I have great gratitude that somebody knew. I can remember when I read the type 4 and personality types, and oh my God, somebody has been walking around inside my soul. They get in there and they use language and gosh, everything I thought was at that point I'd been sober for 15 years and I was pretty miserable, and I realized that everything that I thought was cool about me was causing me all my suffering. And I felt like I'd just been stripped down, and I have nothing to work with here. I'm in trouble. But so that's how it started. I'm grateful for it. But for you, when you think about, the beloved 9s floating around the world trying to, anchor themselves, any words of encouragement that just sort of comes to you around, this is learnable or whatever. I mean, how would you want to inspire the nines, knowing their pattern? Anything come to mind for you?
Well, number one is get into a good relationship. And have good friends, because relationships are the mirror.
Yeah.
And I say that I feel really blessed with that. I've got a great spouse. I've got a 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Brad, who stepped onto the mat with me, and is very supportive of me and
Yeah.
proud of me when I get very visible. So that I would say is really helpful. And of course, the sentence "It's a good day to die" is a great one, right? And I I can't think of really much else other than to remember that I really feel like life is like a labyrinth, and it takes a meander to digest everything,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I feel like the meander for me has been a great symbol to go, okay, I'm on a learning curve. I may feel like I'm getting lost, and it's easy for a 9 to get lost, right? Get lost in, forgetting, self-forgetting. And so the other thing I would say is lucid dreaming is a great metaphor for 9s, right? To wake up in life like it's a dream, and to remember that you're dreaming, and that you actually have power you have agency and power to shift your existence, your dream.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had the pleasure of spending time with Brad. He's just such an awesome guy. Just really,
Yeah.
what an awesome guy. So good choice there, and vice versa. So what brings you joy? Like, what what brings you joy? What do you love?
That's a great question. I right now I'm finding that I love seeing people love, like, Black Lives Matter. The movement is so moving.
Mm,
People that are helping each other during the pandemic is really inspiring. I have a friend who just got evacuated from the fires,
mm,
and all these volunteers came and helped her take care of her horses. Like, I love that. That's just great. I love love.
yeah,
That's one of my favorite things.
yeah,
And so that brings me joy, and color and beauty brings me a lot of joy.
that's,
And I love being in community and laughing, and that's really inspiring. And
mm,
the usual things, great pieces of music. Um, I also think that getting through the window of the fear of disappointing, when I step on the other side, that's really joyful. Like, there's a
cool.
surviving that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and
awesome.
I think I'm really continually impressed with people and their resilience. I mean, it's a terrifying time. It's a really terrifying time.
It is.
And I toggle between being so happy in my life as it is, but also the terror of what could happen.
Yeah,
And so I find joy in moments of beauty juxtaposed to all of that,
yeah.
right? Um,
Um,
and then, of course, I love movies.
But
And,
and it sounds like you have a rating team that lets you know what not to watch because so what are the movies? Any movies stand out that you've watched recently that you really enjoyed?
that's a good question, and I'm drawing a blank.
Okay.
Um, but there are, I really love movies that are realistic in terms of their psychology. Of course, I'm a science fiction fan and a fantasy fan. I love all that, but I love it when they throw in making it realistic to
Yeah.
that degree. Um, and I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank. I love movies.
Okay. Well,
I'm,
are
I'm
you a basketball fan by any chance?
No, my father was a basketball player, but I mean, he was really into that, but I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not a big sports person,
Okay.
despite.
Well, I was just thinking, there's this amazing documentary that came out called The Last Dance, and
Mm.
it's about the Chicago Bulls, and their coach is a amazing type 9 who brings Zen meditation to the team,
Oh,
and
wow.
and really develops this capacity for people to think of themselves as one mind. And as a result of that, they win, 6 championships in a row. That's never been done before. But he's such an interesting archetype, because the books he's written are about that kind of 9 perspective. And so I just, if you want to start your sports career now, I'd go watch The Last Dance. It's really quite a study of the types. Yeah, so anything you want to add that you haven't? You feel like you've got to, you feel complete on the 9? I know we could, there's lots of depths to it, but just wanted to see before we.
I would again reiterate the relationship is a really helpful mirroring. Like, because the fear of the 9 is that I'm going to disappoint somebody, or is my reality right, or whatever. And I remember you and I had an exchange once where I was really traumatized, and you validated my reality, and it was really
Yeah.
thing for me. And I think that 9s spend a lot of time feeling like they have to suffer alone, and they only can be these good-natured people. And I think that the suffering is best as expressed as opposed to hidden.
Yeah.
And that, so because people, I didn't realize this, but people so crave for the 9 to become visible, because they have this beautiful perspective of how life could be. It's kind of like Don Quixote. It's like, why should we live in reality as it is, and not as it should be, right? And I think that people don't realize what utopians that 9s really are. And so I think if we step forward and really say our memory of love, what that looks like, that platonic form, right? And we say it and we put it out there, that actually a dream of shifting from all this horror might really happen.
Yeah, well, awesome. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this teaching on the 9. It's just awesome and deep and beautiful and real. And so thank you. And I will let you know when it's been downloaded and send you the link. And so I'm going to stop this recording for now.
Making me visible.
That's right. You're going to go away, but not very far.